kind of review it one more time, then get on to autonomic nervous system. Remember, reflexes are real quick reactions, basically run by the nervous system. It's a protective thing, okay? So what you're talking about is having some type of sensor or receptor that's monitoring some condition, and it gets activated and fires a nerve impulse into the central nervous system. And then you can have some integration or processing that takes place, but then you're going to send out a efferent motor response to that to some type of effector. So these are the key parts of it. You got to have a receptor, the sensory neuron, the central nervous system where it's going to hook up a motor neuron and effector. Okay. And again, that effector could be a muscle or a gland. The muscle could be skeletal, smooth, or cardiac muscle. And I think I went through this a little bit, but pretty much this is the way you can view different types of reflexes. Spinal versus cranial nerves. If it's spinal, it's just going into the spinal cord, cervical, thoracic, or lumbar, or wherever. Cranial is going to be traveling through those cranial nerves that we just looked at. It can be complex, have several synapses, or very simple, just one synapse. So that's another way of looking at it. These can be somatic versus visceral reflexes. And you have a lot of visceral reflexes. We'll look at some of these at the end of the autonomic nervous system when we cover that starting today. Some different types of visceral reflexes. Somatic reflexes, these are things like biceps tendon reflex or patellar reflex, anything to do with skeletal muscle. Okay. And then finally, is it acquired or innate? Innate is you're born with it. It's there. You can see it in a baby. Suckling. The startle response in a baby is specific. It raises its hands, it arches its back. You put your finger into a baby's palm and it will grasp you. That's a reflex. And it's present at the time of birth. Acquired, an example of that would be a baby doesn't really have depth perception. And those experiments were done where they took babies at a certain age on a floor, and then the glass went over where there was a drop-off, and they could walk, they could actually crawl out onto the glass. Well, they don't understand depth perception until a certain age, and so that's a reflex that they have to develop. The fear of heights or the fact that they know that they can fall off of that. And it's not there initially, they have to learn that. So, this would be monosynaptic versus polysynaptic. Again, we'll look at this reflex a little closer, but in your muscles, you have sensors that sense the tension in your muscle. These are called stretch receptors. And if the muscle all of a sudden is stretched real quick, they can activate and fire an impulse into the central nervous system, usually the spinal cord. And then it connects directly to a motor neuron that then fires that muscle and causes it to contract to resist that stretching for protection. Here is a little more complicated. You have a sensor in the skin, and you're going to have some multiple neurons in between, but eventually you would fire to the muscle. And that might be a pain receptor. It might be for temperature, where you touch something that's very hot and you immediately pull away. You also, like in this reflex, you're going to need to know about it, so you'll send afferent ascending fibers up to your sensory cortex, so you have perception of it, have cortical awareness of it. The stretch receptor, you kind of just looked at briefly already. We'll look at it again. So you have a stretch receptor, afferent neuron, then a motor neuron, and then the effector. And this is basically what the patellar reflex is. And when you do 6, we'll look at about 4 or 5 different reflexes like this. The patellars, the Achilles tendon reflex, the biceps tendon reflex, several different ones like this. So what you did is you hit the patellar ligament and stretch the muscle. The stretch receptors fire, send an active potential in, connect to a motor neuron over the ventral gray horn, and then that causes that muscle to contract. If you do this, you'll notice you don't get any feeling. There's no cortical sensory of that. It just happens. Okay. It's protection so the muscle doesn't be overstretched. When you're looking at reflexes, you can check certain segments of the spinal cord and see is there any problem, or just the afferent nerve. Do we have an issue with that? For example, or the efferent nerve, like in multiple sclerosis, if you don't have phosphorylination, you're not going to get that reflex. It's going to be abnormal. And so you can start picking up abnormalities in the nervous system. Okay. So the autonomic nervous system is kind of an interesting thing. It does a lot as far as happening automatically that you're not having to think about things like your blood pressure. So we're going to look at the different parts of it, the anatomy and the function of it, and the difference between sympathetic versus parasympathetic. Okay? So this sort of summarizes everything we've been looking at. In the nervous system, you've got the central nervous system right here, brain and spinal cord. In afferent, remember feeding information in, afferent impulses, that's all going to be sensory right here. Okay. And now you have what's coming out, efferent. We've looked at this somatic nervous system, okay, that's skeletal muscle, and then the involuntary autonomic. And that's going to be divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, one of the important things here is just think about is everything that happens on the efferent side here, everything that you do, either autonomic or voluntary, you're using this information right here. So that's the data that you're collecting from all those sensors. And remember, those are somatic sensors like in your skin. Those are the special senses, okay, the 5 special senses. And we're going to look at those next after this part, okay? And then there's the visceral receptors, you know, like what's the tension in your aorta right now, you know? You're actually monitoring that. Do you know what it is? No, you don't have to think about it. But you have receptors in there that are monitoring how much force is being pushed against your aorta and your carotid artery right now. So, if you think about it, remember the nervous system and endocrine are involved in homeostasis. The autonomic system is really the crux of that homeostasis. Stuff that happens automatically. I mean, can you imagine if you had to consciously monitor your blood pressure, you know, or consciously monitor your internal temperature somehow? I mean, you wouldn't have time to do anything else. So this happens on its own for you. And so really, these are the effectors. Again, they're using the data from all your sensors coming in, visceral, somatic, and also special senses. And they're going to affect cardiac, smooth muscle, and glands. Don't really have control over it. There's some people that will argue this point. In other words, there's some people that feel through real deep meditation they can slow their heart rate down, okay, to below normal. I don't know if that's true or not. So, but normally no, you're really not, you're not doing this, and you're regulating all these other things, okay, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, reproduction functions, and body temperature. Okay, it's being regulated by these. So, you're using the same afferent information that your somatic nervous system, that's what SNS is, somatic nervous system. So you're using that same data that you collect to make decisions about what's going to happen in the autonomic. The output uses different efferent fibers than somatic and different effectors. Okay? Two parts to this, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And I've got them in red and blue for a reason, okay? And you'll see gradually. These work opposite each other. It's like yin and yang, okay? And at any one time, you're going to be predominantly in one of these two are going to be in control, most of them, okay, at any one time. So, the overall structure of it is similar to both. Oops, sorry. Okay, you'll see this in both. Both these systems are controlled primarily by the medulla, the hypothalamus, and input from the cerebral cortex. So there is some higher input into this, okay? And we'll try and talk about that a little bit later. Again, both of these are efferent, and so their effectors are going to be smooth and cardiac muscle glands. Notice there's no somatic muscle here. Okay, there's no skeletal muscle here. Okay, that's not affected by the autonomic nervous system. Both are controlling visceral activities, things inside your organs, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, these type of things. These are a two-neuron system, and we'll look at this a whole bunch more. I kind of mentioned it before the other day, what we mean by a two-neuron system. In fact, we'll kind of get into it right now. Okay, so just for review, remember in your spinal cord, you have the ventral gray horn. What comes out of the ventral gray horn? What kind of motor? Somatic. And so the cell bodies, like maybe in the ventral gray horn, the neurons coming out. When we say somatic, where's that neuron going to then? Skeletal muscle. Now, that body's in the ventral gray horn, inside the spinal cord. The nerve comes out through the ventral root, right? It goes all the way to the skeletal muscle and connects to it. One neuron. Are we okay with that? The autonomic nervous system has two neurons between the spinal cord and the effector. Okay? And so the cell body for the first one is where then? Where? No, remember that's sensory coming in. Remember, autonomic is efferent leaving. The cell body, we know, is not in the ventral gray horn, right? Because what was there? Somatic. Is it in the dorsal gray horn? No, because that's sensory. What's left? Lateral gray horn. So it's sitting in the lateral gray horn. Its axon comes out through the ventral root. Okay? That's the first neuron. It's got a synapse then with a second neuron. And that synapse is outside of the central nervous system. And remember, when you have collection of cell bodies and dendrites where they synapse, it's called what in the peripheral nervous system? Ganglion, right? Ganglion. So, they're going to synapse in a ganglion. And so you have the first nerve coming out to the ganglion. We call that the preganglionic neuron. And the second one now going to the effector would be what? Postganglionic neuron. Two neurons. Two neurons. Okay? So, it's a two-neuron chain. First neuron is called the preganglionic neuron. It sends its axon to the ganglion that's outside the central nervous system. On lab on Wednesday, I'll show you for the sympathetic where all those ganglions are. They are outside of the spinal cord. They're on the side of the vertebral bodies, outside. There's a whole chain of them on both sides, and we'll look at those. The second neuron is then called the postganglionic neuron. Some folks will call it the ganglionic neuron. And now that synapses with the preganglionic, and then its fibers go to the effector. Okay? And again, autonomic nervous system, that effector is smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands. Okay? So if you compare autonomic versus somatic, the effectors, somatic is skeletal muscle, this cardiac smooth gland, voluntary, mostly and involuntary. Neurotransmitters. We're going to look at those a little bit closer, not too much detail. But what we mean is the connection between the nerve and the effector, between that somatic nerve at the muscle, at the neuromuscular junction, it releases acetylcholine. That's why if you block acetylcholine, you paralyze somebody. The curare will do that. It will block at that junction. And so no matter how you try to move that muscle, it won't move. We're going to see two neurotransmitters in the autonomic system, acetylcholine and norepinephrine. Okay? And we'll see where those take place. And then finally, the action of the neurotransmitter at the either at the preganglionic, the postganglionic, or at the effector is going to be could be either excitatory or inhibitory. So in other words, you can maybe cause the heart to beat faster, excite it, or you can slow it down. You can inhibit it. Whereas in the somatic nervous system, if you're going to send a nerve impulse, you're going to cause the muscle to twitch. It's going to excite the muscle. There's no inhibitory neurons that are going to skeletal muscle, only excitatory. I mean, either you're going to make it twitch, contract, or you're not. Okay? You okay with this? Any questions on it? Very confusing? A little bit, okay. So, with the autonomic nervous system, what we're going to see is this concept of dual innervation. This doesn't refer to the two neuron system. What this means is most organs have both sympathetic fibers going to it and parasympathetic. And so that organ is innervated by both. And so what that means is one of those is going to somehow activate that organ. The other one would inhibit it. And so the example is the heart. It's the easiest one. We're going to see the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic connect to the heart. But when the sympathetic system fires on the heart, it makes the heart beat faster and stronger. It's going to increase your blood pressure. That's the one you use for exercise. Whereas parasympathetic, when it fires, it's going to slow the heart rate down. So like right now, for example, as far as your guys' heart, you right now, most of you have a parasympathetic tone. In other words, you don't really have sympathetic output to your heart right now. Your heart has a baseline rate of maybe about 70, 75, but a lot of your heart rates in here right now are 60 because you have some parasympathetic tone that is slowing your heart rate down. Now, if something happened, if somebody ran in here and yelled fire, and we had to get out of here real quick, what's going to happen to your heart rate? It's going to go up. So you're going to have sympathetic input, you'll see. Okay. So, understand that concept, dual innervation. Okay. This is out of your book, and it's showing you the two systems, sympathetic versus parasympathetic. And we're going to see in a minute another name. There's another name for both of these systems. The sympathetic system, the other name for it is thoracolumbar division. Why? Because it comes out between T1 and L2. That's where those fibers come out of the spinal cord. Versus the parasympathetic is also called the cranial sacral division. Why? Because it's going to come out through 4 cranial nerves in S2, 3, and 4. What this means is there is no parasympathetic fiber, preganglionic fiber, exiting the spinal cord anywhere in the cervical, thoracic, or lumbar areas. There's no parasympathetic coming out. There's no sympathetic coming out of the cervical or the cranial nerves or the sacral nerves, or anywhere below L2. Okay? We okay on that? Preganglionic neuron is coming out from the lateral gray horn and sympathetic from T1 to L2. Here it's going to be the lateral portion of gray horn of S2 through S4, and also we're going to see out of some cranial nerves. we're going to see the ganglion. Remember, you got a synapse. The first nerve's got a synapse with the second nerve. And so the ganglion we're going to see here is near the spinal cord. Here, they're going to be farther out, closer to the organ, and I'll explain that a little better with a picture. We're going to see acetylcholine at the synapse on both of these right here. And we'll look at that again later. Okay. Target organs, mostly norepinephrine is going to be released at the target organ, and this is the fight or flight response. This is going to be acetylcholine being released in this rest or digest. So, what was this system designed for? Survival. What? Survival, exactly. This got you to run away from the tiger. You've got your heart rate up, you've got your blood pressure, it gets blood pumped to your muscles real quick. It steals blood from your skin. It steals blood from your intestines. Okay? It uses that blood in your muscles. Okay? This is designed for when you get away from the tiger, you're back in your cave. Now you can regenerate that energy that you need. Okay? Which system is best to be in most of the time? Yeah. What happens if you're hanging out here too much? What's that? Decrease immunity. Yeah, we start seeing some pathology here. Increased ulcers, things like this. So you need this. You just don't want to be in there all the time. Okay? Your body doesn't want to be there all the time. It should be. It's going to be too much stress on you. And believe me, some people spend a lot of time in that fight or flight mode, in the sympathetic output. And it does lead to pathology, especially long-term stress management. So your book has this in one picture, but I couldn't get it on the same slide, the whole thing. So you're going to see it in two. Here is that sympathetic system starts at T1. You're going to see it comes out at L2. And again, that's why it's also called thoracolumbar. It comes out of the thoracic lumbar area. Parasympathetic craniosacral. We went kind of through these with the cranial nerves. Now you'll see them a little closer. The cranial nerves that it uses is cranial nerve 3, which is what? Oculomotor. 7, which is facial. 10, vagus, and 9. I skipped 9. 9 was that glossopharyngeal. So those contain parasympathetic. Okay? And then, again, sympathetic thoracolumbar comes down to L2. And the other ones are sacral for parasympathetic, S2 through 4. How do I remember that? These nerves, these sacral nerves, are controlling your bladder, your rectum, the uterus. So if you cut these, what are you? Incontinent. So S2, 3, 4 keeps the crap off the floor. Okay? Literally, yeah. And those get injured sometimes, and that leads to incontinence. Okay? Those nerves right there. This is not in your book, but there's some other pictures like this in your book. I use this because it drives home several really important points. The only downside of this slide is the colors should be reversed. The blue should be red, and the red should be blue. Okay? Because red is fight or flight, blue, rest or digest. Okay? So, the points that it shows you right off the bat is it shows you the difference between the two systems. They're bilateral. We're just seeing one side for each. Okay? So in other words, the sympathetic comes out both sides of the spinal cord. Okay? We're just showing you one side. Okay? So the first thing you can tell right away by looking at this is, yeah, sympathetic is exiting the central nervous system in a different location than parasympathetic. Sympathetic thoracolumbar T1 to L2. Parasympathetic cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, 10, S2, 3, 4. Keep, oh, look, the crap off the floor. Okay? Or whatever word you want to use. So, that's the first thing this shows. As you look closer at it, it's showing you something else. For example, the first nerve is solid. The second nerve is dashed. Do you see that? So look at the sympathetic. Here comes the first nerve. That first blue dot represents the cell body of the first nerve. And it's coming out, and it goes just a short distance. These are ganglion. Paravertebral ganglion. They're outside. They're on both sides. And you can see that nerve came out and synapsed, and now the second nerve, the postganglionic nerve, is going to the organ, to the effector. The first nerve is short, the second nerve is long. In sympathetic. The first nerve is short, the second nerve is long. Look at parasympathetic. Here's the first nerve. Solid. It's really long. The second nerve is what? Yeah, the second nerve is usually in the organ itself. So, in parasympathetic, the first nerve is very long, the preganglionic nerve. And usually the ganglion is inside the organ. Okay? And then the second nerve is very short. And there's a reason for this, and we'll look at why that is. Okay? There's a reason for it. Now, the other thing that this demonstrates is that dual innervation. A lot of it. So you can see, look, the heart has sympathetic going to it. It also has parasympathetic. The lungs, sympathetic going to it, parasympathetic. The liver, the same thing. Most of the time, you can see most of the organs are dual innervation. But I want to point out one organ that does not have dual innervation here. There's some other ones, but the one I want you to know is what's this little thing sitting on top of the kidney right here? The adrenal gland, or you'll see it called in your book suprarenal gland. This is a certain part of the adrenal gland, the inside of the adrenal medulla. Notice it doesn't have parasympathetic input. It just has sympathetic input. Okay, a couple other things on this. You can see these sympathetic chains. They also extend down into the pelvis, and they go up into the cervical area. So that means in order for a sympathetic nerve to come out of these up here, it had to come from one of these, had to come in and travel up, and then synapse, and then it leaves. Same thing. In order for nerves to come out up here, they just don't show it coming out, but there are. You'd have these nerves coming in and traveling down the chain, synapsing, and then leaving. Okay. Now, the next thing that we're going to see, that I want you to see off of here, is these yellow dots out here. These are ganglion, okay? And they're called the celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric ganglion, inferior mesenteric ganglion. Where these are, you guys, we're going to see when we look at blood vessels. When that large vessel coming out the back of the chest called the thoracic aorta, when it goes through the diaphragm, it changes name, becomes the abdominal aorta. This is a big, brown blood vessel, the aorta. And it starts giving branches off. The first three branches, after you come through the diaphragm, that come off the anterior surface, is the celiac, the superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric. At the base of those branches where they come out are those ganglions. And so those are the three ganglions. And those are called collateral ganglions or pre-aortic ganglions. And so those are ganglions there too. And so the nerves that go to it are called splanchnic nerves. So this is the greater splanchnic nerve going to that ganglion, lesser splanchnic, lumbar splanchnic. So that's where you'll hear this word splanchnic nerves. Okay. Questions about this? When you take a look at this slide, you guys, there's a lot of information on this slide. Okay? There's a lot of information that kind of puts it together. What we're going to do is kind of walk through all this stuff now. Okay? Starting with sympathetic division. Whoops. So, it's painted red because you utilize a lot of energy. This is, again, the fight or flight response. It expends energy. It comes out from T1 through L2. So the other name for it is thoracolumbar. You will see those other names in a test. Okay. So you need to know both sympathetic and thoracolumbar. You need to know how it comes out. This occurs during stress. When you guys come in and take the test, the lab practical, you are in this mode, fight or flight. How fast does this thing work, this fight or flight response? How fast? A minute or two? Fire up? What? A split second. Yeah. So this is the one that you all have experienced. If you haven't lived your life properly to this point. Okay, or you haven't taken a risk, or you haven't been in a tight spot. So you're driving, somebody runs a stop sign right in front of you, or a red light, and you have to automatically screech your brakes. As soon as that happens, what happens to your heart rate? Goes up. What happens to your respiratory rate? Goes up. What happens to the hair on the back of your head? Stands up. And what happens to your palms? Sweating. Instantaneously. Okay? So just for review's sake here, what was the afterburner input for that? Where were the receptors for it? The retinal receptors, your rods and cones we're going to look at next. That's what triggered it. That information came in and triggered it that fast. And so, instantaneously, that fast. It takes a while for it to go away. You stop, and what are you doing here? You know, my life just flashed in front of me. So it happens really, really fast. Okay? We talked about running into mountain lions. Who here has crossed tracks with a mountain lion? How close was your mountain lion?
We're in the car, so we're kind of safe, but I mean, it was like from here maybe to White Street, just on the side of the road.
What did you feel like?
It was pretty scary. And one other time I was walking to my friend's house, and it's called Discovery, so the dirt, you can see my footprints, and then on my way home, I can see the footprints that I had over my footprints. So at some point, I went this way and the mountain lion went that way. That feeling of knowing that it was that close, just not even seeing it, I just knew it was around. I just, like, my hair stood up and started sweating. I was just nervous.
What about you?
For me, about the counter, walking around the house.
Was there anything between you and him?
Stairs.
Who else saw him? Got close to him? How close? Anything between you and him? Now, did anything happen to you? Oh, so okay, so you were ready for it. But did anything happen to you? Did you get scared?
Yeah.
And it's instantaneous. You guys got to understand something. That goes back pretty far. That's in your genes. That's encoded in there. And if you look at a mountain lion and he looks at you, because I had this happen too, I've seen it, is I don't care who you are. They look at you. They are not scared. You are. Because when they look at you, you can see it in their eyes. It's obvious in their eyes that they're not afraid of you. In fact, they might just walk over and kill you. So seriously, it's one of indifference. And it's one of, they don't care. And it's that bad. And she just saw the footprints, but that was enough to scare her. Is this a real thing, a real fear? Yeah, talk to the lady that was running up near a pool a bunch of years back. And it so happened, a mountain lion, triggered the mountain lion's response. The mountain lion had cubs. She ran that girl down, got her from behind, pulled her off in the bushes. By the time they found her, she'd been half eaten. The mountain lion had hit her, and was coming back to eat on her later again. But just, that response, And so it's a real, this sympathetic thing, you guys, is a real thing. And when it happens, it's real strong. Now, what we're going to see is some people enjoy that, and these are your adrenaline junkies, and we'll look at why that happens and where that adrenaline comes from These are people that seek that kind of thing. So, sympathetic preganglionic neuron. Remember, this is the first neuron. So the cell body is going to be the central nervous system in that lateral gray horn from T1 to L2. And that's why you see a bigger lateral gray horn in those areas. Okay? It's going to come out, and it's going to, these are the things that can happen with it right here. It's going to synapse with the next nerve. Okay, remember, two neurons, preganglionic, postganglionic. And so you have two sympathetic chains, so it can come out and synapse, to those. And we call that the paravertebral ganglion or sympathetic trunk ganglion. And that's the one I showed you, yellows on the side. You have three collateral ganglions that it can go to. Celiac, superior, inferior mesenteric. Again, that's right on the aorta, at where those come out. It's at the base of those arteries. It's wrapped around the bases of those where they come off of the aorta. Okay. It could go to you had two adrenal medullas inside of the adrenal gland. And we'll look at this a little bit closer. And so the first nerve is short. It usually doesn't go very far before it synapses. The second nerve is long. And the thing about the sympathetic system, you guys, is it tends to, the first nerve tends to synapse with a whole bunch of postganglionic nerves. And so it has what we call extensive divergence. It's like ramping it up. In other words, it sends the message out, and now it multiplied it by 20. And you want that in the sympathetic system. You want this system to kick in and really ramp up real quick. And so that's what happens. And it's done from that preganglionic nerve to the postganglionic nerve. The first nerve synapses with a whole bunch of them. This is going to be the opposite of what we see with the parasympathetic. So, we kind of mentioned this the other day. Is this preganglionic neuron for both sympathetic and parasympathetic has myelin. And remember, this has to come out of the is coming out through. How's it getting out of the spinal cord? What's it coming out of into? As soon as it leaves the spinal cord, what's it in? The what? The ventral root. The ventral root. And it's going to then go into the spinal nerve, right? Spinal nerve is mixed, right? Sensory, motor. It's got to get to that ganglion that's right there along the spinal cord. That's where it now enters the white rami communicantase. It goes to the ganglion. So it comes out and it's going to enter the white rami communicantase. And again, that's preganglionic axons white. Okay. And once it goes in that white rami communicantase, it can actually do one of four things. And we'll see. It depends upon where it's at and what it's doing. It can synapse right in that closest ganglion to the postganglionic neuron. So that's the first thing it can do. Come right out, white rami communicantase, and the closest ganglion it synapses in. Or it can travel up the chain and synapse at a ganglion up above or down below. Or it can pass through the ganglions and go into one of those splanchnic nerves and go synapse in one of those three collateral ganglions. Again, celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric. Or it can do none of those and go through the ganglions and go directly into the adrenal medulla. And really the adrenal medulla, the inside of that adrenal gland is really the second nerve. It's glandular tissue, but it's actually really like a second nerve. It's nervous tissue. So that's the four possible things that first nerve can do once it comes out and where it can go. And then the second nerve we're going to see is gray because it's unmyelinated. And it's going to leave the ganglion or the collateral ganglion, or it's going to be part of that adrenal medulla. And then it goes basically to the effector. Usually what it does is it comes back into gray rami communicantase. It goes back to that spinal nerve and then it leaves. Now this is what I showed you the other day that didn't make sense. Hopefully now, if you see it a second time, it will. When you read it in the book, then it's going to, okay, now I'm starting to see it. So this is going to be between T1 and L2. You've got a lateral gray horn. Here's the first nerve coming out, pregangliotic, ventral root, right? Spinal nerve. It's going to the white rami communicantes. It just so happens to be synapsing in that first ganglion. Second nerve is unmyelinated gray rami communicantes. See how it's going back into the spinal nerve, and now it's going to the organ. Here, it comes in and it bypasses and travels up and synapses in another ganglion. Or it could go through, okay, and miss all these and go to the adrenal medulla or one of those collateral ganglions, which is one of the splanchnic nerves. So these are the possibilities of things that it can do. Questions about this? I know this is a lot, you guys, but you know, I promise you get your money's worth. Okay, so this is a picture out of your book. This is in your book, and it's showing the sympathetic nervous system, and you can see T1 through L2, thoracolumbar, and you can see the first nerve cell body is in the spinal cord, and this represents the paravertebral ganglion. And we actually have it on that model in there, and I'll show it to you on the model. Okay? And here you can see what it can do. Here comes the first nerve out, short. Second nerve is black. It synapses in the ganglion right here, and it's going out to the effector. Here it comes in and it travels up and synapses. Or here it travels down and synapses. Here it goes all the way through the splanchnic nerve and synapses in the celiac ganglion or the superior mesenteric or inferior mesenteric. Again, these are sitting on the aorta, a little bit further away. It's not real far away, but it's a little further away than these ganglion here. Okay? And then the second nerve goes to the organ. Or, notice this one passes through the ganglion, passes through the celiac ganglion, it goes to the adrenal medulla. So the first nerve goes all the way to the adrenal medulla, and then the adrenal medulla is going to release epinephrine, mostly norepinephrine, subnorepinephrine into the blood. That's your adrenaline. That's where the adrenaline is coming into the blood system right here. Notice what we're going to. First nerve, second nerve. What's that muscle? Erector pili. And what happened when you saw that mountain line? The hair stood up. And remember, you broke out in a cold sweat. Why? Look, it's going to the sweat glands. Okay? What's it doing here in these blood vessels in the subcutaneous? It's causing vasoconstriction. When this thing fires off, you're going to shunt blood out of your skin into your internals. Yeah, you want more blood into your muscles. Plus, if that mountain lion does get you, it starts scratching you, you're not going to bleed as much. You're not vasodilated, you're vasoconstricted. Here it is going to the heart. It's going to increase the heart rate, increase contractility. Here it is going to the lungs. What you're going to do to the lungs, you think is going to happen there? Yeah, you're going to dilate those bronchioles, get more air in. Notice it's going to the pupil. What do you think it's going to do to the pupil? Pop it open. Yeah, you're going to pop your pupils are going to blow open like that. Whoa, and you're going to see better. Okay. Notice it's going to this viscera in here. What do you think it's going to do in here? It's going to shut it down. Yeah, it's going to It's going to make it so your digestion stops. Everything, same thing. It's going to slow your bladder down. It's going to decrease urine output. You don't want to lose fluid. You want to keep your blood pressure up. You'll see that. Same thing. No, you're not going to deliver a baby with this. But the rectum is going to shut this down. Okay, divert that blood away. Parasympathetic, cranial sacral. This is, you got away from the mountain lion, the tiger, you got back to your cave or your RV or whatever, and you have, wow. Or you just finished taking my test and you head to the pub. Wow. And you sit down and now it's time to recover. Okay? And so sympathetic gets shut down, parasympathetic comes up, and the output is different, cranial sacral. Cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, 10, S2, 3, and 4. And so you basically are now going to be able to start digesting things. You're going to be able to evacuate your bladder. 80% of the parasympathetic is carried in that vagus nerve. That shows you how important that vagus nerve is. So 80% of the parasympathetic output is through that vagus nerve. It's the opposite here. The first nerve, the preganglionic, is long. It goes all the way to the organ. And the second one is short. It's usually just within the organ. So it's either in or very close to the organ. So this is the opposite. And you're only going to synapse with a few postganglionic neurons. Okay? Because really what you think about here, when this system fires up, you're going to kind of selectively fire up to certain places. Okay? I need to empty my bladder. You know, and so you're just going to be kind of, you know, input into that mostly right then. Okay? And so it's a little more controlled thing going on here.
Quick question. I've heard that it's common during combat for people to have to evacuate their bladder, you know, and so wouldn't that be counterintuitive?
Yeah, it's more like a gearing up, getting ready to it. And you see this in other mammals. For example, anybody here ever hunt with a dog? Okay, like a bird dog or something like that. You'll notice he'll get really excited and he'll jump out of the truck and go hunt. The first thing he'll do is have a bowel movement. You know, he will. He'll empty his bowels and everything like that. And it's like a preparatory thing, you know. And yeah, so that does happen. I really can't explain it, but I know you're right. Parasympathetic, going to be the opposite of sympathetic. Your pupils are going to constrict here. Remember, parasympathetic, they dilate. These glands are going to start secreting things, okay? Salivary, gastric, pancreatic glands. You're going to start secreting hormones from glands to increase nutrition absorption. The GI tract starts turning on. You're starting to mobilize the GI tract for digestion. Defecation, bladder, basically urination.
You were here.
You tend to see some constriction of respiratory pathways here. So bronchioles, not so much the bronchioles, more the peripheral bronchioles are going to start constricting here a little bit. Heart rate reduces, force of contraction reduces. Okay, so you're calming down. Both sympathetic and parasympathetic are involved in the sexual arousal and sexual response. There's like a coordinated effort between that. It's like everybody gets in on the game, on the party, you know. It's like, okay, don't leave me out. Okay, cranial, 3, 7, 9, and 10. We kind of looked at these when we looked at the cranial nerves. If you remember 3, ocular motor. Here, I'm not having you learn these ganglia here, but these would be the ganglions that they synapse in. And this one's going to the eye, the intrinsic muscles. Remember, it's following the muscles, the fibers, the somatic fibers going to the extrinsic muscles for moving the eyeball. This is going to be for pupillary constriction and for basically accommodation in order to change your lens focus. Remember 7, you had some of it going to the lacrimal gland and some going to the salivary glands. The salivary glands, it was a submandibular, sublingual. 9 is going to the parotid gland. Okay? And vagus, this is a big one. Now you can understand that vagus, what's happening with it. Okay? It's got to travel all the way through all the organs in the chest and all the organs in the abdomen up until about the transverse colon. The other side, left colon and all, is really coming from the sacral portion. S2, 3, and 4. So, again, this is on both sides. We're just showing you one side. This is bilateral, both sides. And again, notice nothing's going to that adrenal medulla on the parasympathetic. So, energy conservation, rest of digestion, 3 Ds, digestion, defecation, diuresis. And here's the long pre-ganglionic. See how long it is? And the post-ganglionic, very short. Opposite of sympathetic. These are getting things in the head, the neck region right here, 3, 7, and 9. And in the vagus nerve is getting all this stuff, along with S2, 3, and 4, these pelvic areas. So again, sympathetic, thoracolumbar, you'll see pupil dilation, heart rate increases, contractility. That's the force of contraction. So your heart's cardiac output's going to increase. So you go to exercise. Which system is activated? Sympathetic. You gotta get, so that's what's, it's more controlled. You're not scared. You're exercising. Me, when I exercise, I do get scared. But, and so what we're going to see is you're going to increase your cardiac output. That's how much blood your heart pumps in 1 minute. Right now, your guys' cardiac output is about 5 liters per minute. When you exercise vigorously, you get that up to 25 to 30 liters per minute. Big difference, big difference. Blood vessels, constriction of visceral constriction, so your intestines, and then skeletal muscle dilates. You need more blood to your muscles, okay, to get the things done. Also, when this thing fires up, you need to make sure that you have plenty of glucose to get the things done. Also, your brain needs to be more alert. We actually see that there are some changes in the central nervous system that take place that make you more alert, okay? Won't go into that detail, but your liver stores glucose in the form of glycogen, and automatically when the sympathetic system kicks in, you start converting that glycogen into glucose and release it into the blood. So you have that conversion taking place. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. Heart rate comes down, airways constrict, pupils constrict, slud. You get salivation, lacrimation, urination, digestion, defecation. So that's what's taking place. We okay with this? So the hard part really is understanding that pre-ganglionic, post-ganglionic, sympathetic versus parasympathetic, where they come out of, concept of dual innervation. That's not 2 neuron systems, that's each organ can have both sympathetic and parasympathetic input. So remember I mentioned before the neurotransmitters here are acetylcholine and norepinephrine. And remember, neurotransmitters are what go between a nerve and the dendrite of the other nerve, between the final. And so this carries a message across the synapse. Okay? So acetylcholine. Both sympathetic and parasympathetic, that synapse between the preganglionic and postganglionic, so in the ganglion, it's all acetylcholine. The parasympathetic at the organ, the postganglionic nerve to the effector, is all acetylcholine. So one way to look at it is all the parasympathetic is acetylcholine. And the first half of sympathetic is acetylcholine, from the first nerve to the second. Don't worry about this. There's a few sympathetic ganglion that use this. We're not going to look at it. Now, the thing about acetylcholine, you guys, is on the postsynaptic membrane. Remember, you got the first nerve coming in, presynaptic, then the postsynaptic's on the other side of the gap. There's an enzyme that sits there called acetylcholinesterase that breaks down acetylcholine. So what this means is you can deactivate it real quick. So the parasympathetic system can get turned off real fast. Okay? It's quickly deactivated. Okay? Because of this enzyme, acetylcholinesterase. So the effects tend to be short-lived and localized for parasympathetic. That's another reason. Norepinephrine, most sympathetic postganglionic synapse, so where it's connected to the organ. So the second nerve connecting to the heart is going to use norepinephrine. Okay. The adrenal medulla at that connection is going to use norepinephrine. It releases epinephrine and norepinephrine into the blood. This doesn't have an enzyme to break it down, you guys. It just has to diffuse away. It gets retaken up in the presynaptic membrane. And so it dissipates. It takes longer for this to go away. And you know that when you got scared, your heart rate stayed up a while, a minute or two. Your breathing was heavy. It didn't go away real quick, as quick as it came on. So the effect is longer, it's more widespread. This is just a drawing of what we just talked about. Sympathetic. You have a acetylcholine between the first nerve and the second. Same thing with parasympathetic acetylcholine. In the sympathetic, between the second nerve and the effector is norepinephrine. In parasympathetic is acetylcholine. Don't worry about these receptors. You're going to learn those in 6. You have different receptors in different places. They're named after what else activates them. Like these are nicotinic receptors. Because nicotine, they mimic nicotine, activates these. This is muscarinic. You have both alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. You have beta 1s, beta 2, beta 3 receptors here. And they have different effects. Where you'll really learn this is in nursing, because we have drugs that control certain ones of these areas, and especially in the intensive care unit, you may give a beta blocker, or you may actually, stimulate the alpha receptors, depending upon what has to be done to the heart. Visceral reflexes. Remember, we kind of mentioned those in reflexes before, a little bit. This is kind of a list of them. No, I'm not going to ask you these, but it's kind of interesting to go down through and look at them. They're telling you what the stimulation response. So we're going to talk a little bit about urination, micturition in a second. Defecation is very similar. In 6, you'll look at some of these. The direct central light reflexes. You'll look at these. Swallow reflex. Remember we talked about that a little bit? You have a vomiting reflex, a cough reflex, a baroreceptor. There are sexual arousal reflexes. These are mostly all parasympathetic. Here's some sympathetic ones: cardiocilatory, vasomotors, pupillary reflex. Okay. Some of these are real weird reflexes. Like there's one called the gastrocolic reflex. So gastro meaning what? Stomach. Colic meaning what? Colon. Gastrocolic. And it's a reflex. Some people have it stronger than others. Some people don't even know they have it, and they don't understand it. But the purpose of it is designed such that when you eat a meal and you put food into your stomach dilates, expands, and you get tension in the wall. So your body has developed a reflex, so when you filled your stomach up, it sends a message back to the central nervous system: hey, my stomach is getting full. It now sends a efferent out through the parasympathetic to the colon at about the level of the transverse colon, the right colon, and causes the colon to start contracting and pushing things over towards the rectum. That's why people that have this reflex are real strong. They'll sit down and eat like in the morning, and then they've got to go have a bowel movement. Now some people it happens, I drink my coffee, and then I've got to go have a bowel movement. Because the coffee does the same thing, it stimulates the stomach. And so the purpose of that reflex is to get things from the right colon and then small intestines over to the left and start getting it out in preparation for what's coming. Now some people, when this is real strong, they go, it just went right through me. I ate and it just went right through because I didn't have a bowel movement. But no, that doesn't happen. Stuff sticks in your stomach 6 hours or so before it gets in the intestine. What you're doing is pushing the old stuff over to the left side to get it out and ready for what's coming down. That's called the gastrocolic reflex. Has anybody experienced that? Just one person? No? Your husband does? The rest of you don't have that? No. Okay. Yeah, no one has. So, here's one reflex I do want you to know. You may see this in a test, and that's the Victor-Richard reflex. Okay. And so, inside the bladder, in the smooth muscle of the bladder, we'll learn that that's called the detrusor muscle. There are receptors, stretch receptors, and as the bladder stretches, they start firing. And so as the bladder fills up, they become more active and start sending a signal back afferent. And what happens is two signals come out, one for the autonomic nervous system and one for the somatic nervous system. With the autonomic nervous system, now this is going to be S2, 3, and 4, parasympathetic. They come back to the bladder and they do two things. First, they cause that detrusor, that bladder muscle, to start contracting. Why? You want to empty your bladder. And then the second thing it does, it takes what we call the internal sphincter, which is smooth muscle, and causes it to relax. So, I'm going to contract my bladder, I'm going to relax the sphincter, urine's going to come out. But, we live in a society where we like to control things. And so, no, what do? The same input is we get cortical awareness of it because we send a message up, and the somatic nervous system, there's an external sphincter, one that's further down, that is skeletal muscle. And now you fire that. And now you can determine when you're going to eliminate your urine. So you've all experienced this, haven't you? Who hasn't? It's you get the urge, you can feel it, okay? And when you do, you can say, well, I need to go, and so I'm going to constrict down, and then I'm going to find my bathroom. Now, there's differences between people, okay? Me, I can get in the car here, start drinking water or Diet Coke or something, and drive to LA. And probably not stop. It's just, I don't know what it is. Maybe I can fill my bladder up real full. This doesn't start kicking in until way later. I don't know what it is. But I just have that talent. Unfortunately, sitting in the car next to me is my wife. It's the complete opposite. It's like, can we stop? Can we stop? Can we stop? Can we stop? It's like every other exit. So, we have a disconnect. How do we solve that? I stop a lot. That's how we solve it. So that's it. Now, again, Victor-Richard, so I want you to impress your friends over the weekend. I don't have to go pee, I have to go Victoring. And again, they will look at you strange. But they know that you're in a quest into another world, and they will start understanding this. Now, what this speaks to also, you guys, is potty training. Okay? Now, potty training, who's never helped do that? I mean, we all have done this, but help somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. So, what age do you start? Can that start happening? 1.5 to 2 is kind of early.
10% remaining.
2, yeah, 2,
10%
closer to 2.
remaining.
Okay. Why can't you potty train a 1-year-old? Yeah, you're onto it. This neural hookup here, this doesn't happen automatically. It takes some time. And so, neurologically, they haven't matured enough. That somatic hasn't hooked up to where they can start understanding and get control. Now, if you potty train like I potty trained little ones, is you use a lot of driving, and so the 1-year-old, 1.5, even the 1.5, they're going to want to please you, and they'll do everything they can because they get something. But you can't get angry with them because if they're 1.5, and maybe your first kid potty trained at 1.5, but this one now is closer to 2, still hasn't potty trained, it's really not his or hers fault. It's just their connections haven't happened yet. And usually what you'll find is once it connects, then it pretty much goes like that. They potty train pretty quick. Then it's just a reminder thing. because especially the boys, boys just get really busy, and, you know, little boys really don't mind if they're walking around with wet right here. It doesn't seem to bother them as much, you know. So, you've seen it, you understand, right? Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so who has read the autonomic nervous system? Don't be afraid, raise your hand. Good, yeah, I've got a bunch of you. So, let me just show you a couple other things here. I'll get you out a little bit early. How about peripheral nervous system, cranial nerves? Who's read about that? Okay, another couple of people. I've got some of you that looks like you're behind a little bit. Remember, you guys, you got to get ahead of the curve on this stuff. Okay. So, the last thing that we're going to talk about here is you think about it. We first did nervous tissue, then we looked at brain, then we looked at spinal cord. Okay. Then we looked at pretty much autonomic. So really what we've only talked about these sensors, this afferent. So that's the last thing we're going to talk about in the nervous system, would be that afferent side, that input. And we're going to look at both general and special senses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the general senses. We'll spend more time on the eye and the ear because they're more interesting. Okay. So in the special senses, we're going to look at the different organs. We'll look at some of their structure, and then we'll look at the difference, some different types of receptors for the general senses. So when you hear this word, this difference between general senses and special senses, the easiest way to remember this is just remember your special senses, and everything else in the somatic world, skin, muscle, that area, is going to be general senses. So the 5 special senses are vision, balance, equilibrium, hearing, taste, and smell. Those 5. And anybody know why we call them special senses? Because they really have more complex, specialized receptors. Okay. Yeah, they do special things. Okay. And so these tend to be a little more structurally complex than the general senses. So general senses, what we're talking about is these things at the skin level. You can tell something's hot or cold when you touch it. You can feel touch. Has anybody here ever had their general senses, their touch receptors disappear and you become numb? Yeah, it's not fun. It feels weird. You can't feel things with it. Okay. Pressure and vibration you actually can feel through your skin too. You have receptors for that. And then pain receptors. We'll give that a name. So you need to know this. This is all protective. This is so that you know what's going on. Proprioceptors. This one you need to know. Proprioceptors. What are those? What's that? Yeah. You have receptors inside of joints, inside of connected with tendons and muscles, and it's feeding information to you all the time about your joint position and the tension on your muscles and tendons. You need that information all the time. You know. So the general senses, you have exteroreceptors. These are what we just talked about in the skin. Okay. Then you have the proprioceptors that are monitoring position bodies. And again, those are going to be in the joints, like in the joint capsule, in the tendons, and also then in the muscles. And then interoreceptors. These are basically inside the body. Oops, sorry. These are inside the body, so remember we mentioned about the receptors inside your bladder that tell you that your bladder is full. Inside the rectum. The tension on your aorta, okay? Your inner core temperature, glucose levels, what's going on there, what's your oxygen levels inside your blood, what's your pH. All those have sensors and receptors built in different parts of your internal organs that are giving you that information. They're telling you that. So these are those extra receptors that we kind of talked about. Oops, let me go back, sorry. The word for pain receptors, I want you to know, is nociceptors. So you'll see that in the test rather than pain receptors. Or you might see what are pain receptors called? Nociceptors. Okay. Yeah, like within 30 minutes after it happens.
Yeah. Just be like, oh, I'm angry.
You know, that's a very interesting question because there are mammals out there where that becomes evident real quick. Because and there's different theories on why we aren't like that, why man isn't like that. For example, there's mammals where, well, let's put it this way, it's called hidden ovulation. We don't know when we ovulate. But there's mammals out there that do, you can tell when they're ovulating, and now the males know the mate with, you know, it's obvious. Humans have hidden ovulation is what it's called. And there's a lot of theories behind that. I don't want to really go into it, but it has to do with basically sort of the female's way of being selective in the female. And so it has to do with basically the ability to couple another male versus this male, and so if you don't know if you're ovulating, and so there's a lot of stuff that can go on. It's hard to know. And I just actually read a whole bunch of stuff on this recently, which is really fabulous. It's the book called The Red Queen. It has to do, it's written after the Red Queen of the Alice in Wonderland goes into. And it has to do with this very topic. And so it's kind of controversial, we're not sure, but humans are the only ones that have hidden ovulation. You know, one of the main ones, which is really interesting. It is. It really is. So now some females can tell when they ovulate. You can tell by temperature a little bit. In fact, that is the birth control method for Catholics, it used to be. You know, you can take your temperature and when it changes, you're not supposed to, you know, have sexual intercourse. But you know how that works in the Catholics, right? It doesn't. Yeah, it really doesn't. So, yeah, that's actually a good question. Thermal receptors, these would be in the skin. You have simple thermal receptors. When we do 6, you're actually going to learn there's separate hot versus cold receptors. Mechanical receptors, these are the ones we call this because these receptors have a mechanical basis to them. Now, I'll kind of show you one of those. Chemoreceptors, again, these are monitoring things like glucose ions inside the blood. I'm just going to end with this slide. This is showing you some somatic cutaneous receptors. Okay. Here's a hair follicle, one of the most sensitive ones, which you have a nerve wrapped around the hair follicle. And you can tell by movement of the hair follicle. This is how you can tell an ant is on your arm. You really can't tell by pressure unless it's on hair follicles. Remember this deep laminated corpuscle, the sitting corpuscles is deep pressure. This is what we mean by mechanical receptors. What happens is you squeeze this, these layers move, and they cause you to open sodium channels here to start firing this. This here are pain receptors here usually, along with fine touch receptors, these vertical receptors. You've got something called tactile corpuscles. These are more for touch. They're real close to the epidermis. okay? And then zucchinis, of course, also with pressure. So I'll leave it at this